you recently said that Americans should purchase electric vehicles so they never have to worry about gas prices again.
No, that's not exactly what I said. And I only raised that because I can't help but notice that some folks are very eager politically to make it sound as if we're not attuned to the affordability issue of EVs. When actually, what I'm saying is that we need to make EVs more affordable and to put out that national charging network, because we know that if a family can afford to take advantage of EVs, they never have to worry about gas prices again. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that's where we're coming from on this.
Well, right now, I think, as you know, the average cost of an electric vehicle is somewhere in the neighborhood of $55,000, whereas a normal compact car is about half of that price. How are you ever going to be able to bridge that gap and make electric cars actually affordable for Americans within the time frame that you're speaking about?
So again, first of all, let's take an objective look at where we are. The average price of electric vehicles includes a $180,000 Porsche model that certainly not something I've ever seen out in the wild. Let's look at what's out there in terms of, for example, these electric pickup trucks that are coming out from the OEMs in Detroit. Seen a lot of Super Bowl ads around those. Those start in the neighborhood of $40,000. Now, $40,000 is still too much for a lot of American families, which is exactly why we have proposed, through a system of tax credits and incentives, a way to reduce that upfront price to bring it into effectively the high 20s, depending on how and where that vehicle is made. These proposals are about making those EVs more affordable, knowing that the more Americans buy them, the more produced, the more you get those economies of scale, and then they become cheaper as we go. But that's exactly why we need to promote these kinds of policies. Now, I will say, the first electric vehicle that Chasten and I ever had was a Ford C-Max. We got it used, but not that used, and it cost us about $14,000. And we plugged it in the regular wall plug in our garage in South Bend, Indiana, and it was a plug-in hybrid, which meant that for most of our driving around the city, we never had to use gas. If we took a road trip, then we had to buy gas. And so I think another thing we have to do is just demystify EVs, that they're not all these super high-end luxury vehicles, and that while fast charging is something we've got to do a lot of work on, if you're fortunate to live in a single-family home, you already have charging infrastructure for these things. It's called the plug in your wall.
In late January, Florida Senator Rick Scott visited a $1 billion infrastructure project in the Everglades, bragged that he was proud to have helped secure the money for the project. And he, of course, voted against the infrastructure bill. And a growing list of Republicans are doing the same, House Republican Minority Whip Steve Scalise included. So what's your reaction when Republicans are taking credit for a bill that they opposed?
I mean, it is striking, right? Usually you vote for something and then you talk about the impact that it had, or you vote against something you stand by. But I think it shows how good these investments are, that even the people who tried to block them go around on the back end and try to share the credit for them when they happen. I think most people see through that, but at the end of the day, to be honest, the most important thing for us is just getting the projects done. And if that means somebody trying to collect political credit, in a way that's not really consistent with how they voted or acted, we're going to notice that. But I'm going to get less hung up on that because, frankly, I don't want residents or citizens of any part of the country to be punished because of the behavior of their politicians. We need to make sure that we're meeting the infrastructure needs of communities, red, blue, and in between, rural, urban, and in between. And we're doing everything we can to strip the politics out of this mode that we're in now, which is delivery. There's a lot of politics in getting a bill passed. Now we're at the stage of actually delivering these resources. And while $1 trillion is an extraordinary amount of money, over $600 billion of that in the infrastructure side of things, that could go out the door pretty quickly and not have enough impact if we don't prioritize it the right way. And so we have to make sure we're actually meeting the most important needs.
Governor DeSantis of Florida on Monday signed into law one of these so-called Don't Say Gay bills that ban discussion of LGBTQ topics in public schools. You're the first openly gay member of a cabinet. What's your reaction to that law and to those bills more generally?
Look, I think bottom line is it's hurting kids. It's making it harder to be an LGBT. I mean, life is hard enough for let's say a middle school, for example, when you're not LGBTQ. It can be really challenging for kids who are different, or for kids whose parents are LGBTQ. I think about what life might be like for our kids when they start school. If they were in a place like Florida, that might stop them from mentioning that they had a great time over the weekend with their dads. And so, look, this is part of a very familiar political playbook. And I think the reason this political playbook is being pulled off the shelf is that you got a lot of folks who don't have actual plans for the things that are affecting so much of everyday life. They don't have a lot of solutions on supply chains or inflation or infrastructure. So they're looking for somebody to target, to change the subject to these cultural wars. And they're really doubling down on these culture wars where, look, we're going to stand our ground and make sure that we stand with people who are vulnerable, but also point out how we got here. Because at the end of the day, they're busy worrying about what books to ban. And we're over here figuring out which bridges to fix.
I was covering the Trump rally in Georgia on Saturday when Marjorie Taylor Greene, the far-right member of Congress from that state, took the stage and she said this to the crowd.
And you know what? Pete Buttigieg can take his electric vehicles and his bicycles, and he and his husband can stay out of our girls' bathrooms.
What goes through your mind when you hear a comment like that? How do you feel when you hear that?
Well, look, again, the reason you hear somebody like that making nonsensical, literally nonsensical comments like that, I don't know what you would do with an electric vehicle in any bathroom, is because they don't want to talk about what we're actually working on. They don't want to talk about, not only do they not have a plan on climate, they don't have a plan on inflation. What we didn't hear was any kind of critique of our actual infrastructure policy, because it's a good policy. It's wildly popular and it's the right thing to do. So they're going to keep tripling down on anything that can divide and demonize and demoralize, and through that capture attention, right? And I think we need to also be smart about where we send our attention. I know the most shocking thing somebody said or did yesterday gets the most attention today, but if I were to make a list of the 10 or 20 or 50 or 200 members of Congress whose commentary or thoughts or words it would be most constructive to be debating or weighing right now, it wouldn't be the 2 or 3 members of Congress who get the most attention on Twitter for whatever outrage they tried to outdo each other on yesterday.
You and your husband, Chasten, adopted twins in August. Mazel tov, first of all. And you did something unusual, maybe unprecedented for a male cabinet secretary. You took a month-long paternity leave. Obviously, you did this for your family, but it also sparked a conversation in this country, about family leave. And I think, as you know, we're, I think, the only industrialized country in the world that doesn't have, sort of federal paid paternity leave. There's a provision in the Build Back Better plan by the administration that would provide for that. It's been steadfastly opposed by Senator Manchin of West Virginia. I'm just wondering, what are you doing to try to get this enacted? And have you spoken to Senator Manchin, tried to persuade him to change his mind, given him the benefit of what you've learned going through this experience yourself?
So bottom line is we ought to have paid leave in this country. As you correctly pointed out, it's something that people in pretty much every other country, and not just the wealthy countries, can count on. And it's something that most Americans believe is the right thing to do. I don't know how or when we'll get there legislatively, but I believe we'll get there, and we're going to continue pushing for it. Personally, it was extremely important to us. I knew that, by the way, federal employees, career employees get 12 weeks now. And that was one of the very few things to happen under the last administration that I strongly agree with. And I think it happened because, again, there's a bipartisan sense of agreement, at least, among the American people, that it's appropriate. Because of the nature of the job, I obviously couldn't take a 12 weeks away. But I do think that leave should be available, and when it is available to people, that you ought to take it. And that's true for men as well as women. And I'll also tell you, while, of course, I was taking care of business, anything that couldn't wait, anything that needed my attention throughout, that leave was probably the hardest I've ever worked. And I'm very, very accustomed to very hard work, whether it's running for president or on a military deployment or being mayor. I've never been a stranger to 80-hour work weeks. But this is the first job I've had where being a dad is, that is, where, you know, for a while, work began at 3 in the morning and it just went from there.
That'll end eventually, but it might take a long time.
Oh, it's already much better. I got woken up at 3 in the morning last night, but I got to go right back to bed by 3:30, and it felt like a victory.
Yeah, good. Senator Manchin, have you spoken to him about this? Do you plan to?
I'm not going to publicize conversations that I'm having with members, but obviously anybody who wants to know about my personal experiences and what it means for how I come at these policies, I'm always eager to tell them.